We'll call the meeting to order. Happy New Year. If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Leo Biasucci. Jason Keogh.
Here.
Rick Knotts. Ashley Pasquale.
Here.
Robert Smith. Chuck Vaughn. Scott Welty.
Here.
Mark Zeef.
Here.
And Samantha Zilberman.
Thank you. And welcome to Mr. Knotts. And looks like we'll have an introduction later on the agenda. So first we will open this up for the call to the public if anyone from the audience would like to address the board.
My wife.
Good evening. My name is June Vaughn from Lake Havasu City. And the other day, Chuck and I, we walked Rotary Park. And as we pulled into the entrance and parked, he asked me, he says, asked if there was the non-smoking signs up. So we parked facing the water, and yes, I noticed them on all the cabanas, which they are really very nice signs. So as we continued to walk through the park, I was, looking to see, how many signs were there throughout the park. So on all the, credendas on the beach, I noticed them. But then in the child's playground, there's the two, different credendas there, the pillars, and there was only one sign there where the playground was at. And I thought, on all the picnic areas, there was more signs on the picnic areas there than tend to be over there where the children would play. So then we were walking further towards Tennell Park, and there's I guess, new playground equipment that you're putting up and all, which really, really looks cool. And so I walked over there, and I noticed that, well, I didn't really see any signs as I was walking into that area, but then when I was leaving that area, there was a sign there, and I thought, well, why didn't I notice it when I entered it? So I think, there should be more signage there. So then as we were walking towards Tennell Park, I didn't go over there because, there was a lot of kids, on the roller rink and all. But where the sign says Tennell Skate Park, I didn't notice this, a smoking sign there. So I don't know if there are any signs there in that rink or not, and how visibly are there, how is it, to the public. So then as we started to walk up the trails, I thought, well, there should at least be a sign as you walk towards the baseball field. And there is one on the cage where the guys stay, where home plate and the catcher. But if they're sitting on the bleachers facing the field, people there, they wouldn't really know that, well, this is really a non-smoking area, hopefully, unless they go behind where the batter is at. And then we were walking towards the area where the bowl is at, and there was no signages there. So then when we were leaving the park, Chuck asked me, he says, well, is there any sign or anything as you enter the park? And I looked in my rearview mirror, and I really didn't see, any signage there. But I do feel that there should be more signage about the smoking, and also there should be more signage about no dogs allowed in the park. Because when I always read the Onions and Orchids to Chuck, there's a lot of people complain to Onions that, well, doesn't people read the signs? No dogs. So I feel that there should be more signs throughout the park about the no dogs, and also, a little bit more, about the smoking. But otherwise, the park looks great, and kudos to the Parks and Rec department here for, such a great job the city does. And I thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mrs. Vaughn. And since this is the call to the public, we won't be able to have discussion or address the comments you raised, but thank you for bringing them up. And perhaps if anything is able to be clarified in the staff report, we could do that, or on a future agenda to understand if there was some kind of reasoning or intent behind the design placement and have some discussion on that. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the board?
Hi, I'm Jackie Leatherman. I'm your Director of Event Marketing with the Lake Havasu City Convention and Visitors Bureau. Very briefly, I just want to let you know that the Bureau completely supports the Arizona Peace Trail and its development. We have been very active in helping to facilitate a coordinated and well-researched marketing and promotion plan among the 3 counties, and also working with the Arizona Office of Tourism to support the tourism attraction that we really believe that the Arizona Peace Trail can bring to Western Arizona. And if you have ever any questions about that, feel free to contact me.
Thank you, Ms. Leatherman. Anyone else from the audience today? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the approval of the November 27th meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or not voting? Okay, thank you. And now we are on to the introduction of our new board members.
So thank you, Madam Chair. We do have 2 new elected board members. One of us present today, Mr. Rick Knotts, and our student member is Samantha Zilberman. Mr. Knotts, if you would like to say a few words and introduce yourself to the board, that'd be great.
Good evening. Rick Knotts. I'm a former professional in the Parks and Recreation field. I retired from Arizona State Parks with 31-year service. Half that time was in Arizona. Actually, half was with the West Virginia State Park System. I retired as the Chief of Operations for the Arizona State Park System, and that was about 3 years ago. But prior to moving into my Chief of Operations position, I was the regional manager, which was located here in Lake Havasu. So I had spent about 7 years from 2001 to 2007 or 8 here in town, and moved away to Phoenix as chief. And after retiring, we moved back to Lake Havasu, and felt like this is something I want to be part of, to offer any assistance that I could, and look forward to working with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, welcome. And now the staff report.
Thank you. Boys and girls youth basketball games and practices continue throughout February. There are approximately 250 children participating in the program this year, which is on average with our normal enrollment for that program. The Starline After School program will host their performing arts play, which is The Wizard of Oz, on February 9th. Kinderswim starts in February with the elementary school kindergartners running every week through the first week in May. NRPA Fit and Strong program will begin in February with 2 sessions running in the mornings. This is actually a grant-funded program that we received a grant from the National Parks and Recreation Association to train our staff to run. The Lake Havasu City Police Department and the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department dive teams will do a dive training in the pool on February 25th. There's going to be a Let's Go Fly a Kite program will be run on February 22nd, giving the kids an opportunity to make and decorate kites, as well as we'll throw up a couple air bounces in the community center for them to jump around and play with as well. We have 9 new water safety instructors that will begin teaching this month after completing a 32-hour training course. We have added additional arthritis exercise classes to help with the needs of the community at this time of the year. A couple of special events coming up at the community center. There's a vaccination clinic for pets on January 27th. The Havasu Community Health Foundation Health Fair and Heart Health Focus will be February 3rd. The Western Welcome Garage Sale is February 9th. The tree dedication ceremony is February 10th. The Lake Havasu City Neighborhood Watch event and Havasu Night Out is February 12th. The Daughters of the American Revolution Bunko Party is February 21st. And the Mark Hahn Dinner Banquet is February 24th. And of course, our annual WPA firework event is at Sarah Park the weekend of February 16th. And that concludes my staff report. I'll answer any questions.
Any questions from board members?
What was the date of that neighborhood watch program?
The Neighborhood Watch event is on February 12th at the community center. All those events that were listed are at the community center.
Can anyone attend that dive training?
No.
I mean, not to be in the dive training, but as a.
No, it is closed.
Okay.
It's a private rental.
Mr. Keen, is the Kinderswim still supported by another group?
The Rotary Club helps
The-
support that
okay.
program, yes.
Excellent. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. The Trails Subcommittee report.
Okay.
Please.
Just a couple of notes. The new members to the Arizona State Committee on Trails will be appointed on February 16th. Mary Van Roy from our Trails group here in Lake Havasu City has been recommended by the nominating committee to represent our area. So congratulations,
Right,
Mary.
Congratulations.
On January 23rd, the MPO meeting will have an update on the progress of the bicycle pedestrian plan and some of the survey results they have been receiving through the website as well as on their public comment sessions. That meeting will be held at 1:30 at the city maintenance yards. And
Could
again,
you say the date again?
January 23rd. So that would be tomorrow.
Oh,
A lot of notice, I know. January 25th, the Arizona State Parks and Trails will be presenting a grant workshop from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at our local BLM office here, just kind of going over some of the grants that are available and what the best process is to apply for them. So the Trails group will have representatives at both the MPO meeting as well as that grant workshop. And that concludes the Trails report.
thank you. Any questions on the Trails report? Okay, thank you. All right, now we will move into our public hearings, and the first is on the Arizona Peace Trail. Jeremy Castile.
And we've actually had a change in the presenter. It's going to be Wayne Colbank with Logan Simpsons.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you this evening and share with you the latest planning activities for the Arizona Peace Trail. If you can go to the next slide. My name is Wayne Colbank. I'm a landscape architect with Logan Simpson out of Tempe. We are assisting the Peace Trail, Arizona Peace Trail Incorporated, in the planning and development of the master plan for this. And with me, sitting behind me here, is J.C. Sanders. He is the president of Arizona Peace Trail, and he can certainly answer a lot of additional questions as well. I just want to point out to the planned trail route that you have in front of you. It is basically the red line, and you can see that the trail is a large loop extending all the way from Kingman down along the west side of the state, connecting through Bullhead, Havasu, Parker, down to the Yuma area, over to the east to Siloam area, up to Wickiup, and back up. It's about a 600 and close to 700 mile loop, and that's the basic master plan that we are trying to get finished at this particular time. We go into the next slide. That same diagram shown on basically with the background of land uses. The yellow areas are BLM, the pink areas are military, the green is the Kofa Wildlife Area. So you can see how it relates to the various land uses. Next slide. One of the things I want to point out to you is that you see in blue here what we call the cross connectors, and these are actual trails that are there existing now that can be used to supplement the primary trail that we are planning. These will not be designated at this point in time. They are basically there, as are all of the route of the trail is already existing. So there is no new construction to build this trail. It is on existing roads, paths, and other open trails on the various land agencies maps. Next slide. Just some basic facts. About 675 miles for the main loop. If you add all of those cross connectors in there, you get over about 1,200 miles of trails. About 70% of the project is on federal land, primarily BLM, and the Arizona Peace Trail Incorporated, of which J.C. Sanders is the president, is the proponent at this point, and they are a nonprofit organization who has been orchestrating this planning activity purely on a voluntary basis. The trail is developed and planned to promote tourism in western Arizona. It traverses the 3 counties of Mojave, La Paz, and Yuma, and it connects the various communities, as you see there, Kingman, Bullhead, Havasu, Parker, Quartzsite, Yuma, and Wickiup. And as I mentioned before, we are currently preparing the master plan of that primary loop, not the other blue lines that you saw there. Next slide. Some other basic facts. We cross 13 different landowners and jurisdictions, being federal, county, private land. There are 3 BLM field offices, and the significance of that will be shared here in just a second. We have 66 crossings of Arizona state land parcels, which again has some implications on schedule and how the project moves forward. The trail is primarily set up for off-highway vehicles, although the trail is open for all users, whether you're hikers, equestrians, and otherwise. But the planning at this point is assuming that if you can plan for the off-highway vehicles, others can take advantage of the trail as well. The existing trails, as I mentioned, some of them are paved, some of them are dirt, some are existing highways, and they're all linked together to create this trail. The trail does have a rating system of its difficulty. In some cases, it's very difficult, and you have to have the right equipment to pass through. And in other cases, they're basically roads and streets. The vehicles have to be street legal to run on this because a portion of it is on existing streets, whether they're municipal streets or county or state highways. There are not shown in this master plan any of the staging areas and future trailheads. And those are basically assumed will be developed and or connected to the trail by adjacent municipalities such as Lake Havasu City, the counties, and others. So at this point, they are not designated on the master plan, but we know they will be coming. And this master plan is really a living document that will allow for those to happen. The ultimate goal of the project is to create and have this designated as the National Recreation Trail. And the National Recreation Trail designation would allow the project to be eligible for federal funding and other types of money sources. Next slide, please. Just to give you specific examples of the ownership of the trail just by pure length. You can see at the top the Bureau of Land Management owns about 62% of the land of which the trail crosses. The next is various municipality, county lands at 20.5%. Bureau of Reclamation has a little bit of area down south near Yuma. State trust land, about 6%. And you can see the various land ownerships there. But you can see there is a diversity of state, federal, county, and private entities there which this trail will cross. Next slide. Just a little bit on the background on the trail. Um, in 2011, the Arizona Sunriders, who are basically set up in La Paz County, suggested a loop trail in La Paz County. That idea ultimately didn't go anywhere, but it was the genesis ultimately for, in 2013, there were some meetings between BLM and Game and Fish, Arizona Game and Fish, who came up with this idea of the Yuma to Bullhead City Trail, which then really was picked up on by the Arizona Peace Trail Inc. because there are 13 different off-highway vehicle rider groups that have all come together to take this idea and move it forward. And that's where we are at this point. A number of agencies have been, and this is not a comprehensive list, but many of the organizations you'll see here, municipalities, including City of Lake Havasu City, have been participating in the planning on this. And we expect that there will be others as we go forward. The anticipated trail users, again, just to reiterate, could be hikers, joggers, walkers, equestrians, and all forms of motorized vehicles, whether they be motorcycles or sleds or side-by-sides, whatever the case is. The trail is able to accommodate all of those. This is just a photograph of probably your primary users are going to be the folks with the quads and other similar type equipment, although not exclusively dedicated for these folks. Next. I wanted to zoom in a little bit here so you get a better sense of how the trail connects into this northwest part of the state and the western part here. Again, you can see the red is the trail that's being proposed. The blue lines are the connectors, and you can see that with the connectors, you will be able to take smaller loops and be able to go from municipalities and have smaller trail connections. You wouldn't have to travel the whole 700 miles of trail. That would take you something in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 to 6 days if you wanted to take on the whole trail at one time. But moving a little farther south to show just a little bit more of the trail south of Lake Havasu City, if we go to the next slide, you can see how the network here in the northern half of the Peace Trail, there are these opportunities for these cross connectors, which we think are opportunities to break down the trail and to create more day trips and other kinds of things like that centered out of the communities. Next slide. Just to give you a zoom in on how the trail alignment makes its way in and around through Lake Havasu. You see the trail comes from the southeast there. Ultimately it comes and crosses at a couple points State Route 95, moving west of 95 between there and the river, and passing on. So there will be crossings in the trail, but it's not actually running on US 95. I mean, crossing of US 95. So that gives you a good picture of it. On the next slide, this is a concept that I've sort of spoken about, is that this is a diagram of off-highway trails around Baus that have already been plotted out by the rider groups, and that this demonstrates the concept of breaking the trail down into smaller trails that could be day trips or half-day trips. These have already been plotted out. We assume that over time, each of the communities would do something similar to this, or using the rider groups would develop something smaller like this, so that there would be more opportunities to do diverse trail riding as well as smaller timed trail rides. So that's the concept there. So what does the trail look like at the northern end? Near Kingman and in the Wallapai Mountains, it's generally kind of rough. You're also up there where you could get some snow. And so there's some interesting aspects of that, which makes for some seasonal considerations Next slide. Again, this is up near the Kingman area. You're up in elevation somewhere around 6,000 feet, so you're in the pines and junipers. Next slide. Obviously, the trail gets down into the pure Sonoran Desert, and the majority of the trail is in a landscape that's pretty much like this. It also, as I mentioned before, the trail also travels on some existing roads and highways, goes through communities, and as well takes advantage of farm roads and roads along canals and ditches, particularly in the southern half of the project area. What do they see? Along that length of nearly 700 miles through a lot of backcountry, you can imagine that you'll see a lot of historic components, old mining, ranches, lots of different historic things, as well as just beautiful landscapes and other features. Next slide. Some of those other features include this happens to be a stream. It doesn't show up so well on the big screen, but if you'll notice over in the far left, you'll see some little orange items there. Those are actually fish that are existing in that area. So there are some unique flora and fauna here that can be seen. Next slide. Now, the question is always, who are these riders? So we try to explain that a little bit. We did a survey monkey, and we got over 500 respondents. If you look at the demographic age here, the majority are individuals who are over 65. For those of us a little younger who can't imagine taking on a 700-mile trail, that seems a little ominous, but this group of riders, and you'll notice that of the survey respondents, they're not all just from Arizona, they're from 22 other states, which tells you that there's a significant rider group out there who would love to come to Arizona and ride on the trails. So, and generally they are a little bit older. Next slide, please. In terms of the rides they take, generally the riding is with groups of 6 or more, which include groups of maybe up to 50 even at various times. The lengths of the trips, 4 days or more is not uncommon. The 1-day trips and 2-day trips are obviously there as well. The average daily mileage is somewhere, the majority of it is somewhere over 40 miles. So if you imagine along the west portion of the trail here between Bullhead and Lake Havasu City and Kingman, those are basically day trips. And you can imagine how these folks on the next slide will talk about the things that they need are hotels, areas to camp, and campgrounds, and things like that, and fuel, restrooms, food, drinks, repair shops, all of those kind of things. It's basically set up almost that you could go from one community to the next if you have these kinds of facilities there. And people do that now, so it would just be a matter of augmenting those. Some of the other information that they have expressed would be interested in having are maps, although in many cases now you'll see at the bottom there that most people will be using GPS units so they can follow the trail, know where they are at all times, and be able to know what's coming, where they're going, what they're going to see, and be able to access emergency information. So next slide, please. Just some examples of how these groups operate. This happens to be one of the larger groups, but you'll see they spend their day on the trail, and then they've got to land somewhere, which could be a hotel, a motel, or restaurants, other kinds of things. So you can see how this, if the ridership on this trail were expanded, how this could improve economic opportunities for places in various communities. Just a little bit about the economic benefits. They're a little difficult to pin down at the moment. There are no specific studies about off-highway vehicles and how much the economic benefit is here in Arizona. We do know that generally outdoor recreation is a $21 billion business in Arizona, and we do have a bookend of about $3 to $4 billion for overhead, or not overhead, off-highway vehicle activity in the state of Arizona, which is for many people a very surprising number. But when you consider the use and the purchase of fuel and restaurants and other kinds of things, it does add up. And of course, Western Arizona has abundant opportunities for this kind of outdoor recreation, so logically this trail fits into many objectives for communities here. The general trend has been motorized trail use has gone up since 2003. The Arizona State SCORP suggests that this trend will continue at least till 2022. And that's basically where they ended their prognostication. It wasn't that it's going to stop then, but and the trend now is that this riding activity is now becoming more of a family activity. When you've got quads that can handle 4 folks, you can get mom and dad and a couple kids in there, as well as others. So this turning into a family activity is certainly a trend that's happening in Arizona. And of course, the amenities and services needed for the off-highway vehicles will expand in those communities near the trails. So next slide, please. So where we are now, you can see here we've had some pieces of the trail that have been opened, primarily in La Paz County, where the ideas seem to have germinated. And there are pieces of it that have been, as you see here, with ribbon cutting. And there are other sections where the signage of the trail marking has occurred. And some of that also has occurred here in Mojave County, a lot of it up near Kingman. But in any event, next slide. You can see the image on the far left is one of the county highways there near Kingman. The middle bottom image is on some BLM land, and I'm not sure where the one on the right is, but pretty standard trail. And we want to just show you the trail icon here so that you recognize it if you're out and about. So where we are now is trying to finish up the trail master plan. We are still signing portions of the trail where we can, and where we can now is being limited because on the federal lands we don't have the environmental clearances necessary yet. In other words, NEPA, if you know what NEPA is, National Environmental Policy Act, which means there has to be an environmental determination of the effect of this, and BLM is working on that, and I'll explain that in a little bit. There is still marketing of the trail that's going on, although the trail is not intact at the moment. There are still communities and like the chamber that are promoting the trail and selling merchandise and lots of other things to continue the momentum that the trail's had. There's lots of coordination still with the agencies. As you saw, we have a number of state and federal agencies that have to be dealt with. And there is the delivery of these kinds of awareness presentations to various clients and others to make sure the word gets out and everybody understands basically where the trail is and what's going on. Next slide. In the future, there will need to be staging areas and trailheads. And this is where communities such as Lake Havasu City can develop these trailheads in locations that you prefer to have them, and then those connections are made to the trail, the primary loop trail. The trailheads and staging areas can be very simple, like in the lower right, where it's just a parking area. Maybe it's got a restroom, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it has some ramadas there, maybe it doesn't. The one on the upper left is sort of a combination between a trailhead and a campground. So you could see that there are a number of options here depending on the user groups and the interest. And there are and there will be funding available through state parks to develop some of these things. So grant applications certainly would be a source for funding some of this. In the future, there's also a map app that will have GPS components to it. This will be available on the Peace Trails website, and it will provide general information about the trail, where businesses and services are, all the kinds of alerts and things like that that people need to know about as they're out on the trail. Next slide. I mentioned the BLM, and there is a particular challenge here in that there are 3 field offices in the BLM, but there are 18 separate what they call travel management plans, and I'm sure many of you know what the travel management plans are. Each one of the different colors is a travel management plan area, and essentially a travel management plan that the BLM has to do for these areas is they are deciding which trails that are out there in the desert are going to be kept and which trails are going to be deleted and rehabilitated back to some natural condition. So they're trying to manage the free-for-all of vehicles, off-highway vehicles and others going all over the place, trying to restrict, not restrict, but to limit the riding area and the disturbance associated with it. So there are 18 of these travel management plans in the works. Some of them have not started yet, but what happens is BLM has to go through a public process to whittle down these trails, and then they have to do an environmental document of some sort to identify what the impact is of eliminating the other trails and concentrating users onto some trails. Typically, those of you who know anything about the environmental process, it can be long and drug out. In this case, BLM has committed to Arizona State Parks that they will have the environmental work done for the main trail section itself by the end of this year or sometime into early next year. So that is a benefit to the trail because that environmental process sometimes can be very protracted. So, okay, so the long-term goals here for the project, I apologize for all the wording, but I wasn't quite sure how much you knew about it, so I wanted to just kind of give you short sentences so that you can read them. One of the things we need to do is firm up the connections to the major communities. If there are any changes, we're still in the master plan phase, so any adjustments that need to be made, certainly we need to take those into account. Where we can, we like to define the day loops, any communities, and this doesn't have to be done now, but certainly if there are any, we would like to incorporate them. We want to make sure that the trail, the master plan that we have, is incorporated into the BLM's travel management plans, and the assumption is that because of the planning that has been done, that these trails will be accepted, won't be obliterated, and they'll be available for use as recommended or as suggested in the master plan. One of the other things that has to happen here is that the Arizona Peace Trail Incorporated is really a group of riders, and as we move from this master plan phase into trying to implement this, the Arizona Peace Trail Incorporated is not an organization that is really set up to manage this trail. They have done a lot of work to get it organized and do a lot of coordination, but their purpose is really not to manage this trail. So everyone recognizes that at some point in time, another agency or entity is going to need to take over the trail. There have been some discussions with Arizona State Parks, which would be a logical candidate, but also as well, if this becomes a national recreation trail, typically those are managed by BLM or the Forest Service, so in this case it would be BLM. So the discussions of who ultimately is going to own this trail is still out there to be determined. So we're also looking to promote private and public investment. Because I think we all recognize the potential benefits here. There are opportunities for the public and private entities to begin to enhance the main trail here and participate in this in the ways that they can. We want to establish the new staging areas and cross connections, and ultimately we're going to need to get some money for maintenance and operations, and that will be a funding search that will need to happen in the future. Many of the off-highway vehicle rider groups have committed to adopt sections of the trail and basically maintain them to the extent that they can without heavy equipment, and also to monitor the activities that go on. And if there are problem areas or safety concerns and things like that, they would basically do that kind of monitoring. So they still want to be involved, but they can't handle some of the other administrative portions of managing and planning a trail like this. Of course, this master plan, as it's been put together, is an evolving document. It's still over time going to change, and as components are added to the main trail, this trail system will become larger and more comprehensive, and so that's certainly built into the planning that's being done now. If we get the National Recreation Trail designation, that does a number of things aside from allowing us to seek different types of funding sources, but it also helps immensely in the promoting of the trail as a national recreation opportunity. Next slide, please. So the big issues that are sitting out there at the moment are getting this master plan completed. It's anticipated that it will be done this spring, somewhere probably in March, maybe April. We still have to get some NEPA clearance, the environmental clearance on the BLM, which is those travel management plans. We do cross some Bureau of Reclamation land down near Yuma. And at Alamo Lake, the lands around Alamo Lake, of which the trail crosses, is actually owned by the Corps of Engineers. So again, you have to go through their process, and they would need to do some environmental work. How complicated these are going to be, we're just now getting to the point of fully engaging these agencies. So there's still a question mark about what's the cost of it going to be, how long is that going to take, but we generally know what has to be done. Of course, the state land has a similar process. Working with state land, if you want to get an easement or pure right-of-way from them, you have to purchase that. And of course, there's a process for determining the cost of the land that you're looking to acquire. And so that process needs to take place, and our understanding is generally that's probably a year in the works to make that happen, although coordination may yield that time frame can be shorter than that, but we don't know at this point in time. We still have the need to market the trail, short-term and long-term. We want to sell t-shirts and stickers and all kinds of other stuff, and so we will continue to do that. And as the trail becomes more and more cohesive and that we can take on bigger promotional type things. But each community I know is very interested in promoting the trail for local events and things like that. So we need ultimately to find who that agency is going to be managing the trail. As I said, there were some talks with state parks, but none of that has resulted in anything at this point. We need to get all of these trailheads that the local communities, the counties, and other folks want to hook on to the trail. That's sort of a separate process, but those will need to come along, and those can be planned by communities such as Lake Havasu City. And there's one last item that is not related to the physical aspects of the trail, but one of the challenges, and I'm going to let JC talk about this. Do you want to talk, JC, about that? In other states, in Arizona, quads and off-highway vehicles have to be licensed. Other states, they do not. So if someone from Illinois or Florida wants to bring their quad here and it's not required to be licensed there, then it can't operate on the roads here. And that's a conundrum, given that we're trying to promote nationally this trail. And I'm going to let JC talk more in detail about that.
One of the first steps we've done is introduced a bill into the state legislature. It's just now beginning through this session to require the off-highway stickers for all off-highway vehicles. Currently, they're required for all off-highway vehicles licensed in the state of Arizona. We have no requirement for out-of-state vehicles. Several states have already adopted laws of this nature, which require stickers for all of the vehicles. It gives the law enforcement better control of who's out there legally. Currently, if it's an out-of-state visitor here, we have a 30-day limit that they can stay without having their vehicle registered here. That's sort of puts them out of place. We have a lot of long-term winter visitors that that stay more than 30 days, but some areas they cannot license them here because they can't take them back home and license them again, particularly the Canadians. So we're trying to make it possible for them to at least ride off highway on our trails. It won't necessarily make them street legal, this first action, but at least we'll let them ride off highway legally. And I'm still not sure where we'll have to go to get them street legal to ride the highways here, but that's further down the road. We just have to take one bite at a time. I don't think the state legislature will be able to make them street legal here without being registered here. But that's where we stand right now. It's just now getting into the legislature.
I think with that was our presentation, and certainly JC and I are here to answer questions if anybody has one.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
when you guys are talking about presenting it to legislation, have you guys, in what way are you presenting it right now? Are you asking for a temporary permit that they'll have to pay for 30, 60 days while they're here? Or what are you guys actually proposing?
In the current markup of the bill, the existing legislature, we're actually marking it up, and what's been submitted to Congress is a requirement for the out-of-state person to get the sticker when they come to the state, and it'd be valid for 1 year from date of entry.
Okay, and then is there a fee involved in that?
Pardon?
Will you have a fee involved
Yes,
for them to get that?
Yes, there'll be a fee involved. Currently, the OHV sticker is $25 for in-state residents, so it'd logically be the same for an out-of-state resident.
And then where would they get that sticker from?
That sticker would be acquired from the Motor Vehicle Division of the Department of Transportation, the same as the current in-state sticker. They could get it online, or they could go into a DMV office and obtain that sticker.
Perfect, thank you.
And is this citizen-led, or is there a legislator you're working with?
We're working with Representative Drew John from Safford. He's somebody that I know personally. There's the first conference committee meets Wednesday night on this bill. It's already on the docket for this session.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. What an exciting project and a massive coordination of entities. Mr. Vaughn?
Yeah, I got some questions. The licensing, I have a four-seater RZR, And is it with the state? Because I know in Mojave County, and that ours is licensed with turn signals and horn and all the other brake lights, everything that's required in that. And La Paz and Yuma also recognizes that license and everything?
Yes, sir. It's recognized statewide.
Statewide, okay. So if I took it to Phoenix, I could ride it around in Phoenix, I guess.
And actually, according to ADOT, you could ride it down the interstate to Phoenix.
Well, I wouldn't want to get on 40, 40 or 10 or anything, or 8. I did see a tractor on 8 one day, or I didn't see it, my wife told me about it.
I wouldn't take mine on there either.
No. Is there any part of the trail that does go down the interstate? That
No,
you're,
sir. No,
nothing?
sir. No part of the trail is on the interstate. Matter
Okay.
of fact, I'm not sure we get on any federal highways. We cross some state highways and we cross Highway 95, one or two places, but there's very little state highway. It's mostly county.
Mostly county. The other thing, is there maps available now that somebody can get? When you said that we have, was everything that was just on the, I'm blind, so I don't know if you could tell, that you had up on the screen, is there maps available showing those, what they're trying to propose, the existing ones that can be used now, and stuff like that, with the legends?
At the present time, we have not produced any paper maps because the trail is still flexible. We're still making some route changes, and we're also dependent upon BLM finalizing their travel management plans before we can print an official map. On our website, arizonapeacetrail.org, we do have, under trail resources, a PDF file that can be taken to a printer, such as a office supply place, and print a fairly large map, up to 24 by 48, I believe, is the largest size they can print. But it's still not sufficient detail to really be able to ride the trail. We also have a GPX track, which can be downloaded from our website onto your computer and then transferred to a GPS or a cell phone or a tablet. And that you can actually track just almost foot by foot and follow.
Okay, so in the trails that are in town, will they show actual roads, that names of roads and stuff like that?
Yes, they will. On the GPS track, it'll follow the exact road.
Okay. I can see this being used summer and winter because, you know, 4-wheel drive, not only razors and quads and stuff like that. I can see people with their air-conditioned Jeeps and trucks and stuff going out in the middle of summer and doing it too. So I think it'll be used year-round. The other thing I was wondering, you said it had to be street legal. Some of these quads now are registered as motorcycles. I had quads when I first came here, and they had a small motorcycle plate, but I didn't have to have turn signals or anything on it, like a normal, you know, what you have to have on the RZRs and stuff like that.
The state requirement for street legal ATV is horn, a mirror, brake lights, headlights, and a license plate light. So if you have all of those, you can get a motorcycle plate, which makes it street legal.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a great thing because, like, my next door neighbor, he has a razor also, and he says, I can't wait till he says we can find out exactly where we can go. We go out riding all winter long with the two of us.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great recreational opportunity for residents and an economic driver. So other board members I know have questions. Who's first?
Please.
Okay, go ahead.
So I have two questions. The first one, you mentioned the BLM was doing those NEPA surveys, any indicators from the work they've done so far, like on red flag items, anything they've found that that you're going to have to avert or as a showstopper?
Actually, they've worked with us very closely early on when we're trying to define a route.
Okay.
And we've avoided areas that they'd indicate that weren't acceptable to them. We also work with the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and they've identified some areas that they would prefer us not to be on. U.S. Fish and Wildlife has put some areas off limits. So we've worked with all of those agencies to try to make sure we're not encroaching on any environmentally sensitive areas. Once the travel management plan has been completed, such as the Havasu plan, they've already completed it for this area. All of the NEPA documentations for the trails that are open has been completed, and we're only using the ones that are open.
Okay, one more question.
Go ahead.
You kind of glossed over the Arizona State Lands challenge, and I wondered if that really, if you're really not looking at that as a, I won't say showstopper, but definitely a long pole in the tent. I know we've heard about a lot of challenges with agreements with that group.
We're working with the Arizona State Parks in conjunction with the state lands to try to identify the actual what would be required for right-of-way across state lands. And state parks has verbally committed to support the purchase of those right-of-ways. And so hopefully it'll remain in either the county names or the state parks name, real estate right-of-way for the trails across state lands.
One other item I might just mention is that State Land is hiring a trails coordinator. This trail is not the only trails that are proposed around the state crossing state land. So it's the popularity of trails is increasing, and of course they're seeing that as well. So what we heard from state parks was that they are going to get together as soon as that person is hired and begin to tease apart what needs to happen relative to this particular project and others as well. But we, as part of the consultant team, have already done the research on the 66 crossings, and we know basically what they are. We know if there are other conflicts, such as someone has a grazing permit on that land, or there's a mining permit or something that already exists. They asked us to do that research for them because they didn't have enough staff. So now that they have the information, now they can begin to make the judgments about what is needed at each crossing. And so that's a benefit, we think, to the project. Now, the question of whether there's any money that's going to need to change hands, let's just say from state parks to state land. We heard that there was an agreement between state parks and state lands. We don't know any of the details of a sort of non-payment use of land, but that was a very broad statement. I don't know that I'd put a lot of weight to it, but that was what we heard.
So, sort of on the same page, but not. I haven't heard in your presentation of all of these governmental partners any communication with tribal entities or governments, and I'm sure there are archaeological sites all over the place.
At the present time, there has not been any interaction between the Arizona Peace Trail, Inc. and the tribal tribes here in the area. Currently, we do not encroach on any tribal lands as far as crossing tribal lands. And we're staying on existing trails and facilities that have had environmental studies done on them or will have before we finalize it.
Okay.
All of the trails in theory, have already had the environmental work done. The NEPA work to be done yet is, okay, this trail is out there. What's the difference between the way it operates now and when you add and you promote more trail riding? That's the analysis that still needs to be done. So the presumption is that those trails that are out there have been through some environmental analysis, and there is no fundamental cultural resource issue associated with it. But again, it's environmental, so there may be a surprise or two.
Yeah. Thank you. And do you know what portion of the trail is paved altogether? Pop quiz.
That's no, we don't. We can get that for you really easy.
It's a small portion, or not sure.
There's a fair amount in Mojave County that's paved.
Okay.
But I would say that's probably the majority.
There's probably between 10 and 15% of it. There's probably 70 to 100 miles of paved areas.
Okay. Thank you. Other board members with questions?
Yeah.
Mr.
Madam Chair.
Basucci.
So is this trail right now, I mean, can you ride on this trail as of right now? Is the whole thing complete?
Yes, the GPS track that's on our website, or the map that's on our website, is complete at this time. There will be some changes made to it. Matter of fact, Yuma County is working desperately right now to try to modify the trail to get it out of the farm area in Yuma County. And we agree, we'd rather not be in the farm area. We just haven't been able to find another area. So, but it is all, you can follow the GPS track, and I've ridden it at least 3 times, and parts of it 5 or 6 times. So.
Okay, and then
yeah, so you can ride the trail. They exist there now. Part of the reason for the NEPA is so that we can actually mark the trail as being the Peace Trail.
and market it. Yeah, exactly. And so just another question is, it is a very large trail, obviously. You guys are talking over 600 miles. If this were to go through, would there be actual signage out there saying, let's say GPS goes down, let's say there's no service, it being such a big trail, will there be spots saying, hey, 10 miles to next turn off, or more of a directional signage out there?
Currently, the Mojave County and La Paz County have signed most of their county roads that we're using, and there we're generally putting a sign at every intersection or every a major change in the trail. The plan is, once it's completed, we'll utilize BLM sign markers, and we've coordinated with them to mark turns and mark the trail. So the carcinite signs, and we've actually gone on a couple of the county roads already and put carcinite signs every mile, so you'd know you were still on the trail.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
I'd say there probably will be some re-signing, because the sunburst icon is a popular item now, so they're disappearing.
Oh. Yeah. Other questions or comments? Is that Mr. Vaughn? Yes.
A couple other questions. Are you going to have in the system places that are really accessible for ADA, and that on your website and on your stuff like that? And is there going to be on that? I thought I heard you say there's going to be a degree of difficulty in that area. Are they going to show a suggested speed for that area? In other words, if it's one is just flat, going out, and you can go, whatever the speed on a rural road or whatever it would be, it should show or if you're in this next area is going to be a difficult 5, you shouldn't go over more than 10 miles an hour type thing?
Actually, the rating system that we have looked at, and there are a variety of them around the country. Some of them rate the trail system on a 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 being least and most or difficult. Others rate them based on the vehicle type that you can actually get through with. And so that was the choice that we made, because the idea was that folks coming from Wisconsin might not understand what a rating of a 4 is in Arizona. But if they could see an icon of they need a Jeep or they could get by with a bike, that would be an easier way for them to understand how to look at the trail. So that's at this point in time, that's the current rating system that we've got, and it's explained in the master plan. Now, relative to the other accessibility issues, certainly for all of the new trailheads and staging areas, any federal money that's involved with that, such as might be off-highway grants through state parks, that's all federal money. Any federal money has to comply with all the accessibility rules of ADA and others, and even state money for that matter, slightly different, but basically those all will follow that. In terms of the trail itself, I don't believe that there are any real accessibility requirements for a trail like this. The obvious purpose of the trail is to experience the difficulties of it. Now, there will be sections of the trail that are going to be easily accessible for those who are mobility challenged, but for the most part, the idea of the trail is everybody, because you're riding in a vehicle, would have the same access to a lot of the same experiences, and that's the fundamental premise of the accessibility codes, is if everybody can get a similar experience. So in this case, we believe that would be true.
The other thing I remember you saying that just a little bit ago, that you were not going to have any on any interstate U.S. highways, and that and you mentioned Alamo Lake. Does it come down 93? You know, from Kingman to that area down there through there?
No, actually, from Kingman, it gets on a trail that on an existing route that pretty much parallels 93 to the west. And the easiest way to think of it is if you were in Wickiup and you got on the Chicken Springs Road. I don't know if anybody knows where that is, but basically that goes west from Wickiup, and then that road splits and goes north towards Kingman and south towards Alamo Lake. And so if you got on in Wickiup, you could ride a long ways on a trail without ever crossing a road.
Okay, yeah, because that 93 is going to be designated US 11 from Nogales.
Yeah, we've looked at that.
Yeah.
Right now, the studies are very preliminary of that alignment of I-11 north of Wickenburg. From Wickenburg south to the border down there in Nogales, there's studies going on right now. In fact, planning of that alignment. But north of Wickenburg, it's essentially just identified as a corridor, so no one really knows where it's going at the moment.
Right.
So it's harder to address that part of the trail. I'll tell you, JC has been talking to some folks who are trying to get a trail from Wickiup to Wickenburg, basically paralleling 93 again to the west. I'll let him explain that.
Actually, we're hoping to get a trail from Wickenburg to Wickiup on the east side of 93, and we'd cross 93 at Wickiup. Wow. But that's real preliminary right now. We don't know that we have any valid routes through that area. We've identified what might be, but it hasn't been tested. So there's a lot of work to be done there. But as far, that would be the only place we would cross 93, possibly right in Wickenburg at the traffic circle. We might cross 93 there in that area, but we would not follow 93. And one of our concerns with the Interstate 11 corridor is where it would pass by Wickiup. We need staging facilities in the Wickiup area that don't interfere with the Interstate 11. And I've been working with ADOT, with the Kingman field office. Hopefully, once they define an alignment, they'll share it with us so we can avoid conflicts.
So as a Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, I guess our options would be to promote and support this effort and potentially in the future make recommendations for budget considerations for the staging areas and trailheads and restrooms and really adopt sort of our region's portion of the trail. But of course, those are just my thoughts at this point.
That's correct. That was the intention of bringing
Okay.
Logan Simpson in to kind of give this presentation as another public forum for them to get this trail information out, as well as let you guys hear about of what's going on. We've been in some discussions with them regarding staging areas, possibility at Sarah Park, as well as Lake Havasu State Park, as well as the signage throughout the city, so that people do know where the next turn is. The majority of the route through Lake Havasu City is actually on pavement, so it will be just simply making turns. So we need to make sure that signage is out as well. So, but that'll be the information coming in the future to this board.
I do need to make one comment related to that. I've coordinated with ADOT, and they do have a requirement if we cross a state highway anywhere, we have to have controlled access. In other words, we have to have stop signs or traffic lights, that sort of thing at the crossing. We cannot just follow a trail that crosses without control.
Are those crossing areas already identified on your plan or on your map?
Yes, they are. And, a typical crossing area would be like the traffic light at McCulloch, where you could actually cross with traffic control. We also have a few areas, few county roads where there's just actually stop signs, but where we do cross a road, we do have control.
Great.
One more question.
Okay, go ahead.
Where does it actually start in Bullhead, and where does it end in Yuma?
Well, Chuck, it's a full circle, so you could start really wherever you wanted, and you could
okay.
end wherever you wanted.
But
I think it begins and ends in Lake Havasu City.
Exactly.
yeah, well, I know, but I said it was Bullhead, and I would imagine, are they going up over the hill into Golden Valley into Kingman? Is that how they're doing the farthest east loop?
Yes, sir.
And then the other would come down this direction.
And the other from Bullhead follows the Power Line Road from between Silver Creek Road and I-40, comes down that way.
And I know we go out riding, and we go like London Bridge Road, and then stay on the east side, cross over 95, and then take it across, and I forget the name of the overpass over 40, and then go into Topak. In that, is that any part of your route at all?
Yes, that's most likely part of our route, where we would go up on the west side of 95 and cross just west of the way station on Interstate 40, cross Interstate 40 there, and then cut back across to the power line and follow the power line on to Bullhead City.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Knotts, sorry.
This question may be premature since an agency has not yet stepped up to be the managing agency of the trail, correct. At this point, you
That's
don't
correct.
have that. So my question is, down the road, if a community would choose to put in a staging area, campground, I would assume they would be allowed to charge user fees for that.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
And in theory, there is really nothing prohibiting, such as Lake Havasu City, from starting that process now of developing those locations for the trailheads and developing them. You might find the money from state parks to do it, but certainly there's nothing. I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't necessarily have to wait for the trail. You can begin developing now.
And didn't you say that you would help us with grants to set us up to, do you have us who we could apply to and everything for grants for some of the stuff?
Sure, we can give you the names of state park funds, probably some land and water conservation fund applications here. Certainly we can do that. Actually, this master plan was funded by a grant from state parks for off-highway vehicles. So there is a money pot there, just like ADOT has a federal money pot for lots of things like bridges and whatever else. There is an off-highway fund from the federal government, FHWA, to do these kinds of things.
And the Arizona State Parks and Trails are actually coming here from one of the agenda items. They're coming here the 25th, I believe it is, to put on a seminar on how to apply for the grants, and what grants are available.
Of this month, yes. Yeah.
Their grant cycle ends on March 1st, so you'd have to get your grant applications in.
What time is that meeting at the BLM building on the 25th for the grants?
It's from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Thank you.
Well, again, I think this is such a cool effort to see so many different, especially government agencies that you've coordinated with. And do we have any other comments or questions? Well, thank you. Oh, and it is a public hearing. I'm sorry. Did anyone from the audience want to comment? Okay, go ahead.
Just briefly, obviously from the Arizona Office of Tourism, our Grand Canyon is a promotional point. But often too, what we find here in Western Arizona is there is a focus on Tucson, Phoenix, Sedona, and Flagstaff. So this is a great chance for us to come together cohesively, really stand up and say, hey, look what we have. Here locally, we're seeing obviously a lot of interest on the back end of our website and off-roading, and they're amazing. But I think a very important aspect of what they did not touch upon is the experience. And so to me, what this trail does is it really forces you to stop and appreciate our desert environment, how much it does dramatically change in a small portion of time. There's a lot of gorgeous natural points of interest out there, some historic points of interest, some man-made oddities. So there's just, other than just the experience of being forced to just kind of cruise along on a trail for almost 700 miles, there's a lot of really awesome stuff to see that is going to be great to highlight for us.
Thank you. Ms. Van Roy?
And this is Mary Van Roy, and I wanted to encourage everyone to attend that workshop, but you should put in your name so they have a head count of how many people will be here Thursday. And actually, I went to one of these grants in Phoenix, or these grant workshops in Phoenix, and that's how I was able to work with the Friends of the Fair to get the grant for Horizon 6 so we could have our trail. And so I highly recommend these grant workshops. And obviously, we can't probably get anything done by February or March 1st, but it takes a year to put it together. Thank you. Well, and I wanted to say they did a wonderful presentation, and I wish everyone in the whole city could have seen it. It's great.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we will now move on to discussion and possible direction on non-motorized watercraft launch at London Bridge Beach.
Okay, I think we left this item a couple months ago with sending out questions to each of the board members to comment on for some, the idea of sending it out in a survey for some public input. I thank everybody that responded to those questions. So I have prepared all those questions together and prepared to send that out on SurveyMonkey, adding the link to our Facebook and page and as well as our website. I guess my question to the board and the direction would be, is now the ideal time to do that? When is during the year the most ideal time to get the best response? Is it here in the winter with our winter visitors, or do we have more kayakers utilizing the parks in the summer? I guess that's the direction I'm looking for in there, is when would that ideal time be to start the survey, and how long would you like it to go?
Okay. Who has ideas on that? Yes.
So I was thinking we should get an early start on it because it does, we'll have to budget it later on. And this way we would have a consensus and answers to whether or not it's something that even is going to be considered. So if we can get our answers first, then we can decide whether or not it's going to be in the budget for 2018. My opinion.
2019 probably.
2019 budget, which we'll vote on here in a couple months, correct? In July. Don't we vote on in 2018 for the 2019?
The 2018-2019 budget is the second cycle is already really put together. So we would be voting on, they would be approving the 2019, 2020, 2020 and 2021 budget next, well, it would go into effect in July. So next May, the council will go on that. So we've got a few months, but yes, it's getting that information together and putting it as a package for the CIP.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I recommend.
And just to be able to sort of categorize and look at the data you get back, would it be possible to include a question if the respondent is a full-time resident, part-time resident?
Certainly.
Or visitor?
Certainly.
So we had one board member say, start it now. Everyone, anyone? Yes, Mr. Knotts.
Absolutely. I think it would be wise to get the snowbirds an opportunity for their input as well. In fact, I would think that the winter visitors probably would struggle more with put-ins for kayaks than maybe typically a younger summer crowd too. So start early.
Okay.
Would be my suggestion.
Mr. Kia.
Well, so I don't have a position on timing, but I do have some concerns. I initially was concerned that that the survey would just target one group of people. My concern is that if it goes out on the website, we are in essence targeting kind of one group of people, and it may not be the group we're looking for. While I don't think we ought to hand out the survey to everyone with a kayak, I also don't know that that making it available to I don't know. I think if it's sent out at the wrong time, we may get a lot of negative response that isn't necessarily valid.
As part of the public process, every citizen would have the right to, their tax money could go to fund the project, so they would have the right to voice their opinion.
Perhaps, I mean, we're at the end of January, so if it's put out in February and extends into March, and we may get a mixture of families on spring break who may have vacation home. There might get a little bit of a broader reach of residents, either full-time or part-time. Mr. Vaughn?
Yeah, did we ever figure out what it was going to cost for this project?
No, I do not have those figures.
Okay. My suggestion is to put it out in February. Are we going to do just on the website and just in the Facebook?
I may be speaking for Mr. Zaif, but I believe he had said he was also going to take the survey around to some of the visitors and the kayakers down in the park itself.
Right. What I was going to suggest would be to do it in February. you get a broad variety of the winter visitors here. And then again, start April 1st and go to maybe the 1st of May, or maybe even the middle of May, when you get a little bit warmer weather and get more, because there ain't that many people out there kayaking or paddleboarding right now in that. So I would suggest that do the whole month of February, and then do April 1st to May 15th, and that will give us a pretty good view of summer, spring, winter type people that come here.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I was thinking along the lines of the website was being one channel. There might be multiple channels, as we discussed, one with me being physically down on the beach. And I was thinking February through March for sure, because spring break brings that summer crowd out here. And some of those people won't be back again until summer. So to get their input in March, that's a very, very busy beach in March. So I'd get a lot of input. We can discuss it at the board, and then once again, possibly in the summer, do another survey if we need more information. If a decision hasn't been decided on by then, I'm willing to go out and do that some more. But I would at least want the board to at least give me 2 months, or us 2 months of now, while the winter visitors are here, as well as the spring breakers coming up in just over a month.
I think that was the reason for my suggestion to ask the question of a full-time resident or a part-time resident. If the data all looks the same regardless, then I think that kind of gives us the answer. But if it's skewed heavily one way or the other, then I think we do need to hear from the other seasonal visitors or part-time residents. Yeah.
The other thing I was going to suggest for winter would be setting up a table or something at the Winterfest. There's a lot of people come here for the Winterfest.
So a 2-month window, is that what, beginning in February and then coming back early summer?
Yeah, that sounds good to me if the Parks and Rec manager's up for that and the rest of the board.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
is there a reason to stop it and restart it? I mean, could you just run it the whole time until we're ready to? If you, go from February to April. I mean,
We can definitely keep it up on SurveyMonkey on the website.
Right.
The actual physical walking around gathering data, that part might come in spurts. I'm sure it's not going to be 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So yeah, that part could start and stop, and we can keep it up on the website through
just the whole time.
Facebook. Yeah. Sure.
Just keeping in mind the timing for any of those budget decisions or conversations. Right. Does that give you the
That gives me the direction I'm
information
looking
you
for.
need?
Thank
Okay.
you.
It is a public hearing, or is there anyone in the public audience who'd like to comment? Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Thanks for volunteering to do that research too.
You're welcome.
All right, our last public hearing is a discussion on the Cypress Park project.
Well, this park is getting closer and closer, as you guys hopefully have driven by and see the progress. I do have a few slides here that I'll kind of flip through that were taken actually, I believe, today. So just kind of gives you a update of where they're at. There you can kind of see some of the sidewalk, the fencing. There is still some more vegetation that will be put in these pots here as we go forward. There you can see the start of the playground. That is should be getting wrapped up this week with the rest of the structure being completed.
Mr. King, can you
Yes.
go back to that picture?
Certainly.
My children were having quite a debate on what that is. Is it a zip line? Does the large green?
We're not certain. It does look that way to me as well. But I cannot 100% confirm that. I will I will do some research and
The
find out for
debate
you.
will go on.
Yes, you're gonna have the kids debate a little longer.
They can make it whenever they want.
Okay, sorry for interrupting.
No, that's perfectly fine. Here's another picture of the other side of the playground. One of the questions always comes up regarding shade. There will be a shade structure covering the playground as well. And then just kind of a view back from the park, what will be the parking lot, the fields, and the lake. It's absolutely a beautiful view. It's amazing. So just some statistics. The sod installation is scheduled for next week. So you'll start to see the grass come in. The tree installation is 65% complete. The curb and guttering is approximately 70% complete. The sidewalks are approximately 80% complete around the facility. The retaining walls are approximately 90% completed. The restroom is approximately 75% complete. The lighting is 60% complete. The storm drains are completely completed. The irrigation line placement is also completed. To this date, the project is approximately 70% complete overall. Construction is still expected to be substantially complete in late February, early March, with the punch list items going through the month of March. So we're hoping 6 weeks is really the turf time that we want to give it before we start allowing play to be on it, just so that it gets a good root and good base in there without being torn up. So that leads us into the very beginning of April and have a ribbon cut and get started. So.
And what did you say was being completed through March?
Punch list items, so just, if things, this got missed, that got missed,
okay.
the sink wasn't installed correctly, or just paint wasn't right, just some little things that go on.
Okay. Exciting. Comments, questions from the board?
Mike, are those going to have permanent goals?
No, they will be movable because the field could really be striped for any different number of activities.
But so the city will be supplying goals? I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to.
Well, I'm being told yes, they're in the bid packet.
Okay.
So yes, goals will be provided.
Okay. Did you hear anything once the lights were erected?
We have not really heard anything yet. Again, they haven't fully been powered and turned on. We are anticipating the first time they come on that there will be some comments until they really get dialed in and shaped perfectly, which Musco is anticipating a few nights of work to be able to get them really dialed into where they need to be. Okay. So I know engineering was going to work with the community surrounding, letting them know that, just to try to cut down on some of those comments that's not, when they first turn them on, it isn't set perfectly, that there will be some tweaking that will be done.
Very good.
If anybody's read any of the onions and orchids, you can tell some of the comments on there already.
Maybe we need to add some more orchids. Good. All right. Any other comments or questions on the project update? Would anyone from the public like to comment on this item?
Once again, very briefly, a lot of people think that part of my position is to support the nearly 500 events that we have in Havasu annually, but also to recruit new events. A lot of people think they're spectator, but really it's a lot of athletic events. So you'll start seeing more of me now that these projects are starting to come to completion, so I can stay on top and so that we can get them going once they're ready to go.
Thank you. And again, I know I brought it up before, but I do know that we had that event scheduled in April. So is it?
We're still thumbs up is what I'm getting. I had that phone call the other day and from our engineering firm of what those exact dates were, and they're on current construction schedule. There's no concern.
Very cool. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, what would you like to see as future agenda items?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Keene, you mentioned that the city has talked to the Peace Trail folks about some possible partnerships, locations for staging areas, etc. Has there been enough discussion that would merit a presentation to the board?
I don't think yet. Those are still pretty preliminary of where those locations might be, and do we need 2 in the city? Do we need 1 in the city? So I think right now they're pretty preliminary in those regards.
Okay, thanks.
But those will be coming in the future, so that you're aware, but just not quite yet.
And we did have some items from last month that will be in the future. Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that public was concerned. We brought up, maybe you could bring us up to date on the Rotary Park no smoking signs and stuff, and how many. I thought not all of them were completed yet. That's why they weren't all up yet. I thought it was coming to say, so maybe give us an update on that.
Yes.
Yes, I'll bring that. There was the dog signs as well was an additional agenda item, so I can bring that together as a package.
And then you were speaking of the channel lights, possibly the illumination, maybe seeing if we'd want to start a recommendation for a sample project. I don't know if you've gotten any word done, but maybe you could bring us up to date next meeting on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can go back and look at that.
Okay.
No other items?
Is there any in the works? I know we have the dog park on the island, Lions and Sarah and Avalon. Is there any parks up in the north end of town? Any parks up in that area that we're possibly looking at for a dog park up there?
Not currently. Avalon would be, I guess, the furthest north park that currently
Well,
has.
I keep getting to east, up on the east end, like Cherry Tree, anything up in that area.
Not currently, no.
There's a park at Cherry Tree, right? Off of Cherry Tree.
Yonder Park.
Who runs that?
The city.
The
City
city
does?
yes.
Okay, so we maintain that park.
Correct.
Because that's actually the first time the other day. I know there's a big dirt area in the middle that's not being used, so that could be looked at possibly for a dog area if we want something up there. So.
Do we need to have this as a discussion item on our next agenda? Opportunity or
Well, you know, Chuck was
additional
asking about that a couple months ago, I remember, and then the holidays had stalled it out. So I guess if you want to wait another month, Chuck, or do you want it on the next one? I'm up for him.
future. Okay, well, thank you for those items. And our next meeting is
February 26th at 6 o'clock.
okay.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all.